artists. Welcome. It's a small audience here today. Towards the end of our Congress of HASS. My name is Dan Woodley. I'm a professor in sociology here at the University of Melbourne. But today I'm speaking in my capacity as president of the Council for Humanities, Arts and Social Sciences. But the normal Congress of HASS. Just before I introduce our panel today, I wanted to begin by acknowledging the wide people of the call the owners of the land into a meeting today. The unceded lands. I wanted to acknowledge their elders past and present, and the need to listen to their calls around voice and treaty at this time we meet on this land of theirs. I also wanted to acknowledge any Aboriginal people who are doing this today in the room, or who might be listening to this session that we're recording later on. So the Congress has had 22 different HASS associations involved in different ways over the past week, and the involvement of the Australasian deans of arts and arts, social sciences and humanities. DASSH has been a really key partner in making this event happen, supporting right from the start, and getting the deans involved is pretty good too, because they're the focus on that really support things in. But today we have the NOADD, the network of deputy and associate deans as part of the DASSH group, who have agreed to put on this panel for us at lunch on the important topic of what might be coming for us as we come out of an unfinished continuing pandemic. So I'll now hand over to the chair of our panel, Andrea Rizzi, who will introduce the rest of the panel. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for organizing this Congress. Thanks for introducing us. Thank you for being here today with us. So I was downstairs. I'm Andrea Rizzi, I'm Associate Professor of Italian Studies and Associate in Research in the Faculty of Arts in the University of Melbourne. And I'm here really as convener of NOADD, the network of associate and deputy deans, which is a network that is part of DASSH, the Australasian Council of Deans of Arts, Social Sciences and Humanities. And this is really an opportunity, or one of the opportunities that we've had as NOADD to come together and discuss what we feel are very practical challenges that we have been facing and are facing into the future, and how we can together discuss and address those issues and come up with not solutions, at least some sort of suggestions or ways in which we can move on together. And this is very much because of our group being, some would say, middle managers or leaders of different levels, stages of careers. We're really looking at it from the perspective of working within universities, engaging, of course, with communities, and trying to work together to address, as we will find today, pretty big challenges and problems, mostly for our students, really, but also for our communities who are. So, without further ado, I'd like to quickly introduce our speakers. We are hoping that Janine Burke will join us very shortly, probably running late because of heavy traffic in Melbourne today. But I'd like to introduce our two speakers. So here, right next to me, I have Andrea Witcomb as a professor, Alfred Deakin Professor in Cultural Heritage and Museum Studies, and also Associate Dean of Research at the Faculty of Arts and Education at Deakin University. I should point out, Andrea has handled the role of distinction, but was also, until recently, Deputy Director of the Alfred Deakin Research Institute at Deakin University. So I have quite a few hats and roles that I think is very useful for us to have here today. And then next to Andrea, we have Brett Hutchins, who is Professor of Media, Communications, and also Deputy Dean of Research in the Faculty of Arts at NOADD University. And again, Brett has leadership roles, was also head of school of media, film and journalism, and head of the communication and media studies program. And I will introduce our speakers today on the sort of leadership perspective. I'm not going to talk much at all about our research, experience, expertise, But what I've asked our speakers, and I'm hoping that all of us will be able to talk about, is yes, how are we coming out as sort of HASS communities, humanities, arts and social sciences, how are we coming out of the COVID crisis from, as I said, a very practical perspective, but I think two perspectives I would like our speakers to engage with. On the one hand, their own perspective, in their own roles, how they see the challenges and how they are sort of contributing to sort of this phase coming out of the last 2 years of crisis. So from the perspective of the roles, but also from a broader perspective, a national, if you like, a transnational perspective. Now, what's the big picture here from a perspective of us working with our students and working with our communities and working as researchers. So without further ado, what I would suggest we do is the speaker will sort of give us a little introduction to sort of get us going with the discussion. And then after that, there might be sort of questions among ourselves, but also I will invite questions and comments from you. So, Andrea, would you like to start?
Very weird, Andrea.
Yeah, just the role we are, and that's me.
Well. Hi everybody. It's really nice to be here. So I think I want to start by saying that for me, in my role, whether it was the Deputy Director of the Alfred Institute or the ADR and the Faculty of Arts and Education, there have always been two tensions, but I think that, or rather 8 tensions between two things, but that tension is kind of quite high during COVID. And that's the tension between the need for productivity in terms of research outputs and research income, and the need to achieve that by building community, because quite often, especially in more rarefied circumstances, say within a research institute, what you're actually cultivating is highly ambitious individual research. So in fact, my starting point was right. There's two tensions: a tension between community and productivity, and between community and the individual. Now, when COVID hit, the first automatic response, whether it was at university level or at institute level, where I was to begin with, or at faculty level, was how the heck do we maintain productivity in a context where teaching and research staff suddenly called upon to not only teach from home, but to put everything online. So the teaching hours, of course, as you all know, went haywire. They also had to, in most cases, care for children, not for elderly parents. So they were stressed out. And in a context where, including for research only, they couldn't actually undertake a lot of their research because they couldn't go out and about. And of course, remember that at the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't have any idea how long this was going to go on for. And we now know that certainly in Victoria and Melbourne in particular, it's been on 2 years, and we're still in there. So I guess there was a bunch of measures, both at university and local level, to try to address the productivity one. And I would say that at university level, that was the chief interest. So there's a whole lot of measures around ensuring that HDR students could continue with their work. So they could all apply for extensions of candidacy. There was extensions of scholarship. I'm sure your institutions as well. They could take computers home. We instituted a scheme to help them pay internet fees so that they could access the library, have Wi-Fi at home, etc. And that's sort of from the Wi-Fi onwards, and even down to local level. So yeah, and helping them with organising home offices, basically. putting a lot of resources into building community amongst them, so increasing, innovating there with specialised to run extra seminars, shut up and write sessions, which also became, you know, psychological counselling, or kind of at least not psychological counselling, but you know what I mean, places where they could safely express what was going on with them to each other and gain ideas for help. We instituted an HDR only space for seminars, no supervisors, so they could communicate their ideas, take them out. And we also developed, as time wore on, and we realised this was going on for a while and the problems were getting deeper, we also institutionalised kind of individualised mental health approach to the well-being of HDR students, which we started noticing quite a few were turning up with problems, and we required professional staff to undertake mental health training so that they knew better how to deal and communicate with students who are stressed. So that's kind of the HDR front. And of course, now we've reached the end of federal funding for extra candidacy time and scholarships. So, you know, the problem there is for us is that when our need to behave, we're back to normal when we actually know that we're not normal and we're living the legacy of it. So that's what I'll say on HDRs. For staff, for those who are in teaching and research, the first measure at faculty level was really to say to them, don't worry about your research workload allocation, we'll take that on 2019 KPIs and discount 2020 if your 2020 are worse than your 2019. So that affects how much time they get for research at Deakin and how much time they are involved in. And we extended that. That's still current. Question mark as to whether we're going to do that practice next year. It's just sort of normality coming in, right? But that's what we've done essentially for the last 3 years. It's kind of used the baseline 2019 performance to regulate research time. As time went on, we realized that if, you know, 2020 performance probably wasn't that much affected because of the time fund. If they were going to have articles, they were already in the system. If they had research grants, the money was already coming in. So the real issue is 21, 22, right? So, so we started to design schemes to give people a little bit of release to enable them to get back to their life. And we called this, so we have a publication scheme, but in addition to that, we instituted what we call the carer scheme, and the name was on purpose. And in a way, you know, almost think of this as a kind of mental health well-being initiative in a way, whereby we said, if in 2020 you had heavy caring responsibilities, were homeschooling children, etc., here's a little grant for you up to $3,000 to give you some teaching relief, so you can get on with the publications that were interrupted. And I can't express how important the kind of psychological advantage people felt that they were being used after and that someone cheered. So that was, and that ran in 21 and 22. The other thing was that we also added teaching learning as well as research assistants to our normal grants. So there's a number of ways we can get marketing for that, you know, it didn't give them the equivalent of sabbatical, and of course this was in the context of their sabbatical studying was out of focus. But it helped and it gave them psychological support. And so in fact, the publication of the 21 continued. They went up. They're down a little bit now, but that pipeline issue, but they actually went up, as did our grants. We actually over-exceeded our KPIs for research income across all categories and all faculties. Then the community, so there's the productivity answer, mixed in with a little bit of well-being, caring, recognizing the circumstances for work. And in 2020 and 21, we also tried to keep community going. So certainly within the Alfred Institute, there were regular weekly morning teas and morning teas just went online. That quickly became extended into a weekly seminar series as well. And then at faculty level, we had 2 seminars in 2021, actually engaged with various people's research and their engagement with climate change, as well as their ideas for how the institution could help address climate change, remembering that many of us have actually come out of the climate at that summer. Many of us were impacted by that event. And then the other one was to have a weekly seminar series where each faculty research group basically presented its research program, gave examples of the research projects that were ongoing. And they were really well attended, like 50, 60 people each week. So that was like the meeting place for researchers that were not attached to the Alfred, because they weren't having those meetings or like in business groups. So that became a gathering point. So now I would say that if we go to now, the problem we have is this course of normality when people aren't coming back on campus. They're all night or Zoom. So those seminars and that's gone. So we no longer have the energy around gathering around Zoom, because Zoom has become transactional rather than communicative. So people aren't coming on campus. They're not, these Zoom kind of techniques won't work anymore. They're, of course, in a context where domestic student numbers are going down, budget problems, and we haven't yet got the solution to the impact of the job for. So, in a context where in this country at national level, we most definitely haven't sorted the funding model students, HASS, and particularly the smaller and regional universities suffer in particular. My understanding is they kind of okay because the families of those they have the money to pay the yes. That's not so in other places. So they're going to with, but that's still national policy. But the impact in the relevant universities is significant. Coming at in Deakin's case after 2 years of consecutive redundancy. So staff well, knowing that they're going to have to teach more next year because of the drop in student numbers and the impact of the redundancies, so they don't have any or as much money to pay specialists, so we have more. And of course, the force for productivity doesn't stop. It increases by at least 5% every year. So the question is, well, how do you do it? And in my mind, coming back to really important, re-energizing the research, what I call the research ecology. So I've just called the new research groups that have actually energized before, and there's new ideas that have come together to develop their research programs. I would still within that, not just productivity KPIs, but not KPIs is the wrong language, but I've made it clear in the application form that I expect strategies around building research environments for HDRs, capacity building for ECRs and MCRs, really using supervision panels to build people's ability, promotion, career progress by ensuring that ECRs, MCRs, and particularly women have access to supervision. So I'm trying to deal with all of these intangible issues, which I think impact cultural practices, which impact community. So even though from above, the metric, the KPIs of output, publication, research and funding, I'm trying to get those by playing with how community is practiced. So that's what I want.
Well, thank you. But that's incredibly insightful, clear, and very useful sort of snapshot of what we faced the last 2.5 years and really suggesting about how we come out of that. So thank you very much. We'd like to move on to the rest before we open it up.
So, and it's kind of interesting having a moment of self-reflection here, just thinking about the way Andrew responded to the chat is an incredibly detailed way of thinking about what we did, and it's been interesting. I was going through my notes when I was doing this, and it's a strange thing, but psychologically, I'm not actually wanting to revisit what happens. Like I am, as is my way, admittedly, I think I've come up with a poorly planned policy platform manifesto, full-scale reclamation of our disciplines, but but it does come, it is because of, I think, and this is what I think about the diversity of our disciplines in our university system, is that, the event in Brisbane, Australasian, sorry, we do love acronyms, don't we? Australasian Council of Deans of Arts and Social Sciences and Humanities, and it was really interesting to talk to people from around the country to discover that the experience we had in Melbourne, lockdown, wasn't always shared by that distinctive ways. So the way I think about what needs to be done comes out of a very specific context when you talk to people from regional universities, private universities, out of suburban universities, DA universities. Like I think the answers are different. But what does come out of it for me is a need to return to purpose and values, and a need to I've been trying to come up with a diplomatic way of putting this. Maybe being less focused on holding our third as a set of disciplines being under attack by government and by, frankly, the whole world has suffered. And we know we have suffered differentially. The jobs ready graduate package is an utter abomination. But the question is pushing out into the community, explaining our values, and not as much talking within. Like I think there's a case to be made, and it comes from a middle management's a very big thing, isn't it? Like the middle's not huge, just for the record. But what it does give you insight into is, I suppose, a better interface with whatever senior management looks like, but also trying not to lose touch with day-to-day realities of schools. Because I think I think Jackson and Dan are very strong, and I think it speaks to something. If there is one thing positive to come out of COVID-19 is to demonstrate the value of our disciplines. That COVID was not only a medical problem, it was a social problem, it was a communication problem, it was a public policy problem, it was a health, social determinants of health problem. And we've got so many people sitting within our disciplines who have got so much to say about these things, and it's about pushing them out there to speak about the value of what we do. And I think sometimes when we do that, by virtue of our training, by virtue of winning points of argument, I think sometimes we pull back and very modest, whereas in certain forums where we're not talking amongst ourselves as content, it is okay to make a bold declaration. And I think this is where we're missing some opportunities to actually push out our own publicly in terms of into the media, to the public. And I have a series of, what's called almost like chats where, like talking to people who don't necessarily know what we do, but aren't necessarily hostile to what we do. Instead of simply assuming hostility. One thing about this relatively talk to us the groups outside, only to discover that most people are just sitting there waiting for you to talk. Like, what do you do? What are you about? What does what you do matter? Instead of assuming, suppose internalising the attacks on the values, attacks on humanities and social sciences. They're not making the mistake that News Corp stands in the Australian public, I suppose, in some sectors. The second one, and this comes from my experience as a head of school, like any head of school during lockdown, frankly, probably why I don't want to think about it, but just some really difficult situations with distressed students, distressed staff, while also, like many of us, doing challenges in their own homes, again, which is often an unseen thing. There's no one who really got away scot-free that I could see, even those who were boasting about the fact that they got their publications up and that was often cover. I discovered that something else, not thinking about the hard thing, because I thought they did that instead. Not always very helpful for their colleagues, just a little bit. But yeah, but there's also one thing coming back is the value of their students. And at the moment, I picked up, and there still is in Melbourne in particular. I can't speak for the rest of the country. I don't live here. But our students want to have their difficulties and the challenges they experience recognised. They also want to celebrate their achievements inside them. Before I have picked, a lot of our empathy, our kindness, our sympathy can also draw away from it. They're wanting our engagement, they're wanting our support, without sort of there being forced counsellors for them.
Yeah, that's
yeah, and I think we've got to be visible. I really, and one way to obviously do that, and I say this is it sounds like contradictory given the doing research, but also I suppose within our groups, talking very openly and honestly about the value of teaching, and that there is still a group, small. There's a fantastic group of incredibly dedicated educators who can't hold them back from wanting to teach. But there is also another group who are engaged, frankly, in a very complicated, sophisticated game of the country. And we need to be open about this. If what we do is about the collective good, we can't turn away from where there's evidence of an actual collective, which is a group of students, by looking after our own individual research. I understand there's a careerist dimension to that, and there's a certain irony in me saying these things. But it also speaks to the trajectory of the career in which classroom research, colleagues, disciplinary associations need to move in and out of each other. Keep our disciplines free with it. I think the other thing is to recognise that at the University of Broadcombe, we actually have a former arts graduate in education. He grew up in Southern next to the one where I went to school in Western Sydney. So he's another one who likes to pretend that he wants like whole football jerseys up to there's an opportunity in terms of, like the assumption with government needs to be stood. We've got the ARC review, we've got the University of Victoria, we have a new government, we are coming back onto campus. A lot of universities rethinking the way they do things. And it's just really important in my mind about this part of that conversation, stepping back passively to actually give a framework for the members of other groups. But I think finally, let's face it, it's a pothole. If this was the road out of COVID, at the moment we have a lot of holes in it, and frankly, probably doing a suspension effect. But that isn't to say we're not moving. And I would, and I think CHASS in particular, but either, this is so much easier to say either before the Accord, after the Accord, some sort of national summit on humanities, arts and social sciences to announce our value of government to people outside our sector. We're moving away from talking to each other is valuable, do it all the time. But using that connection to what's happened with COVID, COVID was just a medical problem, you know, we wouldn't have been people understand how social media works and communications and medical services, for example. Because, yeah, right at the moment, our students want to speak in favour, and they are being differentially unfairly treated and according to faith at a fair rate. The former government is gone, and the minister is no longer the minister who decided to release grant announcements on, you know, Christmas Eve. And I just don't know how much value there is in holding individuals in difficult experiences. Even though we, I think, privately, please anyone who has difficult experience, please see professional help. I know what to do. You know, it's just really important to understand that when we're speaking out, that we need to speak about what we bring, rather than, I suppose, giving one or two things that I've seen over my career, being outraged if you even have to explain the value of what you do, or assuming that people are being hostile, because there are so many arts graduates in this country. And I think the challenge, and the idea of the summit is, of course, the core challenge, and I'll finish in 1 second, is we would have to agree what we stand for and value. And I don't really believe that we're really arguing amongst ourselves. There's times where we actually have to step out and say, well, okay, if the purpose is the end of the group, winning or points of argument is sometimes self-defeating amongst ourselves. If you look at the amount of students going to bringing to the university setting, you look at where they end up, you look at what we do in the classroom, you look at what we do in the research, which is so many things for it. And just to finish, I went back, I was trying to think about how do you come out of a crisis when you return to the sense of your original purpose. So I'm reading from a document I pulled out. Enrich cultural and community life, elevate public awareness of educational, scientific and artistic development, promote critical inquiry, inform intellectual discourse and public debate. Use expertise and resources to help realise the aspirations of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and to provide programs and services in a way that reflects principles of equity and social justice. They are all direct links from the Monash University Act. The piece of legislation makes the university possible. And I have looked through a number of other university acts, and the answer to why we matter and what we have permission to do is sitting in the original legislation that makes the university possible. But we actually have to move ourselves to the centre of seeing ourselves as what makes the university possible instead of standing on the margins. I think sometimes we do that to ourselves. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Brett. I think it's a really interesting mix there of publication, but also really useful suggestions. So thank you. Just quickly, I don't want to sort of take much sort of time and take the privilege as chair, but I just wanted to sort of just pick on a couple of things that both of you said. One is passing reference to impact, which I heard from both of you. And I just wondered if you could sort of reflect a little bit more on impact. There's a big drive currently on impacts, on thinking about impact, what it means, how we can build our research, teaching around impacts, and that's a really crucial, important significance of making a difference to our teaching and research, and everything we do basically needs to bring some benefit to our community, whether it's local, regional, and global. Just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about, are we going in that direction? What are we doing about it? Is it something that we should be doing differently? And following from that, and I guess I want to underscore, because Jenny is not here, and she was going to really speak about teaching. So I feel like we are missing a bit of sort of focus on teaching, which, as you said, Brett, teaching is really the core business, if you like, of what we do as university. And there is a lot to be said, of course, as you mentioned, both of you mentioned. There are so many challenges our students have to face, and big concern about quality of teaching, what we actually give to our students. Are we delivering? Are we offering our students what is appropriate given their circumstances, given their challenges, given their ambitions? So that, having said that, when we talk about impact again, I just wonder, I'm thinking of what you said about that sort of fine line between supporting our staff did some teaching already, but then, you know, what happened to teaching? And I just wonder, you mentioned KPI, we talked about KPI. Well, can you actually change the KPI? Isn't it sort of the time to actually seriously consider changing KPI, or we think the KPI is so useful, the center of that, thinking about it.
Yeah, so that would be exactly where I was going with my answer to your question around it. Because I think we are so caught in this frame of counting everything and metrics being the purpose. I mean, if you hear any university executive giving a report on how well the university has done, I bet you rankings will be in there, dollars will be in there, HDR completions will be in there, things that can be counted. So I think, so to kind of build a bridge to what Brett was saying, we need to develop, in my mind, a way of accounting for the value of our work, which actually focuses on values, because values is actually what the HASS sector is about. Can't take values out of this. So for me, what is one of the values of HASS research? A really open and complex discussion in the classroom about values. So teaching has to be part of how we argue our value to society. And yet, of course, the engagement in impact, it's all about the research, and teaching is not part of the landscape. What is the biggest, most important thing that as a sector we do? We educate, not train, educate the next generation. Educate. What's education? It's not about values. So that's the first thing to say, to bring research and teaching together under the umbrella of impact. So I think Brett, along with totally with you, getting on the front foot and telling our stories better, not from a defensive position, but just telling what our contributions are. I think we really need to push against this culture of metrics. I think and that's why I'm kind of trying to say I'm trying to create a situation where those metrics do improve, so I'm doing my job that it needs to be done, but doing it in a way that is attentive to values and to community and to cultural practices. Because if we don't do that, what we're doing is alienated individuals. What's the biggest problem? One of the biggest problems our society currently has: individual alienation. And we're fostering it with our current policies. And this kind of blind, in my mind, somewhat limited attention to me. So I think that would be my answer to you. We need a different way of account. I'm not even going to use the word measure. A different way of accounting for the value of our work, which values intangibles as much as tangibles, and puts teaching in there, in the mix, so that the benefits of this.
But I'm also just thinking about that blunt reality that I'm dealing with the DVCR at 14. Yeah, and I think like I kept thinking what I'm being involved with. Given that we're sort of familiar sort of company, and obviously no one really listening out there, but look, look, I must admit my new dean. We have a new dean as a case study. Fantastic meeting, restoring and nothing in my first meeting with this year. What you came to I had a check because I don't like my APIS, and it's not the same, because look, and I'm assuming if I went, and I went and checked, and the KPIs are doing fine. I think the point is, it's around mistaken means for ends. Yeah, you know, like I actually genuinely believe the faculty. I'm in a big university. Money matters, okay, like, but it's the means, not the end. So that's the question: is if we're getting the questions right, if we're getting the right scholars, if we're engaging in the right ways, then metrics. Actually.
But we're never asked for
Yeah.
what is the impact of your work, or what, you know, that's never in our KPIs, right? We're never asked to tell a story. We're asked to tell how many dollars, how many publications, how many HDR. But we're not really asked, where's your energy? Where's your contribution being made? What are the problems that, and not even that, and I mean, I kind of want to be really careful with what is the problem. Because we've also got that you're addressing that kind of thing. I also want to be really wary of developing a discourse where the only benefit, in fact, that we argue our field has to be registered in a material, tangible change to a policy or whatever. Yes, of course, that's important. But where's impact on the policy of ideas and arguments to our respective fields? Scholarly impact is the other one that's what I'm about. And scholarly impact. So I wouldn't only see impact as external to the university.
In fact, scholarly is really internal, but it can also be external.
Yeah.
What do you do with it?
It depends on what you do with it, exactly. And so if you give a really good interview on radio or part of a documentary, or I mean that's scholarly impact in broader public arena.
Well, as my colleague Dan would know very well, we have a colleague, Jenny Lewis, who's doing really exciting work around impact, articulating impact, and really scholarly research is what grounds everything we do. You have to start with high quality scholarly research, and then that can then lead and create all sorts of pathways. It can lead to all sorts of other pathways.
That's right. You know, I think we've got ourselves into this little corner. We've backed ourselves into a corner that's really hard to get off. And we have, it's also a generational shift. But you know, the ARC, the Discovery Program, still has the word pure research in it. And so many of us have gotten that. And so many of us, who are still conference, don't actually know how to argue the national benefit of that. We kind of have backed ourselves into this corner where we think we can't argue some policy outcome or quantitative impact on some community or other, or which is not to say that any of these things are not important. I'm not saying that, right? I'm just saying we've lost the art of arguing for that national benefit residing in scholarly new ways of thinking, new theories, new methodologies, new ways of bringing different forms of knowledge together. That is a benefit.
Yeah, but I think that's a really important point. And I think that actually there is now the space, there is that possibility to have a narrative-based approach to how we explain what we can do it. The ARC allows that.
Yeah.
Actually, the KPIs and metrics that universities use don't make much sense.
No.
The world there, which you do, of course, ARC and other funding.
That's right.
So we kind of like contradicting ourselves in a way. They're using internal KPIs that don't actually make us speak more, more articulate. Why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and how people are relevant to the society outside.
That's right.
And I'm just thinking, why aren't Australian University and the University signing the DORA segment, which actually makes it very clear that those KPIs or metrics can't just be of one kind or one type. You know what I mean? It's a whole raft of ways in which we can explain, articulate what we do. So what's holding our university from actually embracing that much more nuanced way of saying what we say, what we do, and why we do it, what are the values, how the values inform the research and teaching to do.
Well, I think it's because this metrics measure is so strong, and behind that is this push for rankings. I mean, if we look at European universities, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrea, but my impression is most of them don't care about the global rankings. They're not necessarily very high in them. It's an Anglo world. It's a UK, North America, Australia, and New Zealand problem. The Max Planck Institute. What's that in the global rankings? Yeah, we all know some of the best thinking comes out of such news, right? So you look at the way German universities run, certainly not on KPI metrics.
Yeah, there is a reason why Australia is so keen on that. We might be wrong, but
International, then
it's the Chinese market. Students look at the ranking and if we rank really highly, then we get more students.
Yeah, and that's why I planted that in around student policy. So yes, exactly. We're fixated on metrics. If we're fixated on global rankings, because we think that will get us to international students. And China's still got closed borders. We know what happens if that market goes belly up. So the ultimate problem, really, if you put it all together, is this expectation of constant growth. Because it's the expectation of constant growth, whether it's on research KPIs or student numbers, that drives a perception of the need to go up in rankings so that we increase our international student market so that we have growth.
Yes, I was just about to say it's time for the audience to come in. So.
We've received Melbourne in ancient Greek and Latin.
Latin.
Yes, Latin, ancient Greek, yes. I wanted to bring the conversation back to COVID. In particular, about community engagement. One of the things that keeps ancient Greek and Latin kind of alive at Melbourne is all of us, you know, or COVID, we're very involved in reaching to communities outside of universities, whether it's giving a lecture to secondary school students or teachers, preparing to teach the music curriculum, or on lunchtime talk to bankers, you know, very much, or at a club at the Melbourne restaurant like CBD, or to a group of retirees, which is one that knows something about the ancient world and the race and the humanities. That's a different sort of engagement than with companies or with policy drivers. It's a bit more community based. That was something that we did very well, which of course COVID required us all to do it on Zoom, which didn't work very well at all. And now we've come out of COVID. I think we're struggling that even though we could do things live again, there's an audience that is still a little trigger shy, you know, coming up into another non-common way. Yeah. I'd like to hear your thoughts about whether there's different types of community engagement activities we could do, or if we want to continue with the activities that we have done, or is this just something we have to deal with that you know we can't do as well as we used to because our audience is not as capable of being the person. Look, my only observation would be the groups who I'm working with that I'm aware of starting to have some success in this area of approach is almost 2 or 3 step process where they've almost had to come together with the groups again to talk about where they are at in their willingness to engage again. You know, like it's almost like you got to re-establish the relationship first and then rethink how an event might work. And it is happening slowly, whereas like the groups that I've seen that are just sort of like, oh, well, you know, I've got that contact there. Look, we'd love to put that on it. And then none. Like they're just none. And it's this question of, I mean, yeah, because it's really tricky, but I think what sometimes being missed from very busy people who are teaching the research is you know, that initial phone call or just coffee or the discussion around like, well, what's working in terms of getting your people engaged at the moment? Because we don't want to be famous, obviously, but we want to share what we do. We want to do it in a way that also works for you. And usually giving people a bit of time. And so the groups I've seen doing that really well, they're not up to where they were. I don't think in this city, personally, I think it will take just as long as the lockdowns took to return to any formal. But those groups that are building momentum again have spent a lot of time on establishing relationships. But they're also going back to sort of hybrid event things that they're really going back to what they used to do. It's true. There's not been a lot of new forms that I've seen. That could be wrong.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I think you're right. Relationship building, re-establishing the relationship, understanding where they're at is key. But I think a little bit of creativity, perhaps, in thinking about what genre of narrative and what medium to best express it might be best. And, you know, I think along the lines of Brett, you know, we underestimate how much people might actually be interested in what we do. To me, with Latin and ancient Greek, you know, it's imagination of other times and other peoples and other cultures. I think we need to get better at capturing, at reinvigorating our content with imagination. And that's the excitement and energy that we share. So I think it requires a little bit of rethinking. Well, it's back to what are our actual disciplines about and what can they contribute, right? And you know, as soon as you said ancient Latin, you know where I was? I was in my primary school in Portugal, going and getting files for the future in the Roman answers beneath the main constant, climbing into the dirt. That's where I was when you said we thought Latin.
I'm glad I figured out happy with it.
Did you? I'm very happy memory. Yeah.
So that was a great picture. I'll have that. I'm very nice.
Little 7-year-old Andrea, isn't it?
We are running out of time, so I'm going to just transport for another question.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Mia. I'm the Director of Research and Strategy. I've got an unusual title. I've always been about that at the University of Tasmania. I mean, this is fantastic. Thank you so much. You both highlighted, I think, how the last couple of years have not just been COVID, but also all these other changes to higher education. We basically know from the redundancies, change of financial packages, funding of universities, we've got generational shifts, and we've got which is all resulting in huge changes in things. The fact that it's so muddled actually makes it quite different. In addition to what Brett said, and I completely agree with I really do not want to remember the last 2 years. It was really traumatic from a professional point of view and actually also from a personal point of view. So I guess my question to you is, how do we go through and reflect? Well, we don't want to learn from the reflection and then move on. How can we involve our colleagues, our staff, our students in finding ways of moving forward? And I guess these events and the organisations like CHASS and DASSH and others, I think can really help in that. And some of them don't know that. But I'm really just throwing that question, you know, how can we go through this process that we need to go through to be able to move on and reflect?
Well, In 1 minute.
I'm sorry. No.
Okay, so I'm just going to treat this. Not inhabiting the victim identity. Not actually saying to people we need to move on, putting all the energy into the practices that re-energize people, culture, and community to start doing things differently. Would be my answer.
Okay, the short version. I'm sorry, I was going to say the same thing. Get off Twitter. In terms of moving forward, I mean, look, I'm sorry, it probably is simple. I can't remember a time in my career where someone hasn't told me that universities are more or less costs. So the question is, what are we moving on from? Like before the COVID, I don't remember anyone telling me we were living in some healthy age. So it's sort of like, so you hang up, you had a problem before and you want to hold on to that. Like the question is, if there is a break, we have had the hardest thing about living through history is experiencing. We've had a global crisis that we've all lived through and we've been subject to, so we're not just reading about it. And this question about what do we want now, you know, in order to stop repeating the mistakes of that. Now I understand, you know, we're not in control, etc. The one thing in moving through it is I am doing it a lot. And like every conversation I'm having with colleagues, it's like trying to find the point where the person has some agency. Instead of talking about, you know, this is broken, that's broken. It's like, yeah, I know, yeah, but what are you working on? What's your project about? Like, what'd you teach last week? Tell me you did last week. You know, like, that's what we're talking about. And it's not being Pollyanna-ish about it, but yeah, I do think we need to let people hold their experiences in different ways, but also work out ways. I do think about assessment and then sort of work with it. Like, if we need to help our students talk about their stories during COVID, there's ways of doing that through assessment ideas. You know, like, there are ways we can do this in relatively structured, safe ways by using help counselling services and advice as well in that to make sure we're not doing anything that is unsafe. But yeah, we have to, like, you know, I keep coming back to it. You know, I'm doing with all 10 faculties at the moment at my place. I'm sorry, we are still, it sounds very arrogant. The problem is that if we want to tell the story of COVID, we have to come from our faculties. We've got to do this. And the problem is that everyone talks as if somehow the arts and humanities are all on the margin. Sorry, like we just lived through something that places us. If we are prepared to accept that opportunity and then not get too caught up on that's a whole other thing.
I think Mia's question is and the answer is the excerpt, so anyway, prompt for the next conversation, discussion, possibly even a summit coming up soon. So, not organized by me, let's see. So, I would like to thank and Brent for their really wonderful contribution today. Thank the audience and thank Dan. And look forward to seeing you soon for more discussions and I think very practical, ways in which we can move on and deal with that. Thank you.
And on behalf of the church, thank you again. I think as the panel highlighted, things weren't exactly great before COVID, but I think the last few years have highlighted the way that our society is shaped by all kinds of things that we talk about. It's sharper. But we're also the ones who can point out the different ways, sometimes small, sometimes large, that groups and individuals do shape the world. And that's one way of talking about impact. Yeah. So that's something we can do for ourselves and others. And within the university, it's partly about telling our story better, but it's actually useful for everyone who works in the university sector to think more broadly about these things. So thank you so much to the community, to the panel, sorry. To the community. Look, the way we do this as well, and it's hard because one of our strengths and also weaknesses is the way we can find those points of disagreement, critical or otherwise. But this event has been a way to one way that we can work collectively on articulating
Thanks, Dash, for being involved this year. We're going to announce officially tomorrow that the University of Sydney is going to host the second Congress of HASS next year. So maybe that would be a perfect place for this summit to take place. But we'll talk some more, and thank you to our audience.